right. Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started. Thank you. Thank you. Some energy. All right. All right. So I'm so glad we could get together in 2024. How exciting is that? We're here. We're welcoming some cold weather next week. So I'm glad it's warmer today. But I'm going to go over some January events. We have obviously breakfast on the Marsh today. But we've got mugs on the Marsh this weekend on Saturday from 10:30 to 12:30. This hike is with the Indiana Native Plant Society. So we've been hiking this trail. This will be the 12th time that we've hiked this trail this year. So we've hiked it once a month for the past year, kind of talking about the different things that are changing. So it'll be kind of like a wrap up in that, but we'll see if we continue doing that. We have a workshop. Eva is putting on a native plant propagation winter sowing workshop on January 14th on Sunday from 2 to 4. So if you want to check that out, make sure you look on our website. We've got short hikes for short legs. Maybe, I think it's supposed to be like 7 degrees, so we might not have it. So be on the lookout for that. We will be talking about snow and ice if that happens. That's from 10 to 11. But the day before at the Allen County Public Library, that will be a little warmer. We'll be there for that. We've got a program, so we're doing kind of the same themes once a month with the library. And then we have a volunteer opportunity on January 17th, honeysuckle breakdown. And it's not dancing, but you could dance if you wanted to. And that will be out at Eagle Marsh East. So that is for January. The Ramblers are meeting at the barn this month. And then on February 2nd. So February 2nd is World Wetlands Day. So there are a couple things going on that day. Acres, they're doing a hike out at Rock Chan Memorial at 10 a.m. The city is opening up Camp Scott Wetlands around 1 p.m. so you can explore those. And then we will be doing a hike from 4:30 to 6. I think the Environmental Resources Center might be doing something the night before to kick off World Wetlands Day, but I'm not 100% sure on that yet. And then we will have our World Wetlands Day trivia on February 7th. I'm holding this tiny little mic. Hopefully it improves our Zoom experience. But come out to World Wetlands Day trivia on February 7th from 6 to 8. And then next month for Breakfast on the Marsh, we'll have Dr. Lou Weber from USF. She's going to come and speak about ecology, so that will be fun. But today we are really lucky to have Shandi here and John Gevers. They're going to be speaking. They're from Stillwater Hospice, so they're going to be speaking about Stillwater, and then John's going to be talking about his experience as the groundskeeper and the prairie steward out at Stillwater. So Shandi, if you could, she is the business development team lead. Did I get that? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to give you this. Okay. If you guys could give her a warm welcome.
I'm going to try to pin it on me.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to ask your Zoom people if that's okay, or you just want me to keep? Okay.
Can we hear? We'll see.
Okay. How about in the back? Does everybody? I've never been told I talk too quiet. So if for some reason you can't hear me back there, let me know. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Again, my name is Shandi. I work at Stillwater Hospice. So I'll talk a little bit about Stillwater first. We were formerly visiting nurse. And I say that still because that name's a little more familiar, especially in this area. But back in March of 2022, we changed our name. It was just a rebrand. So we didn't get bought out or have new owners. It was just a rebrand, and we changed our name to Stillwater Hospice. And part of that reason is we did some focus groups and talked to some of the families that we served. And they said they wanted a name that represented really what we provided and what we do. And so we started with putting hospice back in our name. So that's our core service line. We wanted people to know that that's what we're really good at and that's what we specialize in. And Stillwater actually came from some of those family members of patients we served, where they said, you kind of came in when time was very chaotic and you calmed things and you sort of stilled that water. And so we just thought it would be a really good representation of what we hope to provide when we come into a patient and a family's life. So Stillwater Hospice was our new name. We did have a new logo also. I love that you have this slide, John, because it's perfect for everyone to see. So our new logo is the water lily. And what's great about that is the water lily grows on water that is calm or still. And the 5 petals on our water lily, they represent Stillwater's 5 core values, which are compassion, comfort, guidance, inclusivity, and stewardship. And then those 3 lines under that water lily represent the 3 rivers of Fort Wayne, where we were founded and where we started back in 1888. 1888, which is crazy to think about, that 136 years ago this year, we started as a local nonprofit organization. And today we have grown. We're very excited about the growth that we continue to see. In March of 2020, we partnered with Family Life Care. They were a local nonprofit out of Bern. And then just this past year, in March of 2023, we partnered with Kosciuszko Home Care and Hospice up in Warsaw. They were also another local nonprofit. So now we serve 12 counties. Allen County is still where we started, and that's why that Stillwater Hospice name and logo kind of ties it back to our roots. So I just like to start with a little bit of history so that you know where we came from and what we do. And so as I mentioned, hospice being our core service line, again, what we're really good at, we put that in our name. Hospice, grief support, and, oh, I'm missing one. Hospice Home. John, how did I forget? Almost Hospice Home. That's a big one that we'll talk about today, our campus. So I'll say just a little bit about hospice care. Many of you may know hospice care is, it's a compassionate kind of care where we come in with someone is at home, anywhere home may be. So a residential home, an independent living, an assisted living, even a nursing home. Our team can go in and provide end-of-life care to anyone that has a life-limiting or terminal illness. So it's for someone that has maybe, we think a lot of cancer, but there's a lot of neurological diseases and illnesses like dementia, Alzheimer's, all different types of dementia, COPD, ALS, so all different types of illnesses that Stillwater Hospice team can come in alongside that journey and provide compassionate care. And with that, it's changed so much since 136 years ago, as you can imagine. We are no longer just a nurse that comes in, we have a whole team now. So a nurse, a home health aide can help with bathing and nail care and hair care. We also have a social worker that can come in and provide support spiritually, emotionally, and also help with financial responsibilities. Any questions you have about Medicare and Medicaid and insurance. Social workers are a wealth of knowledge and resources. So we have them on our team, along with spiritual care, non-denominational chaplains that can come in and provide emotional support, wonderful volunteers, music therapy, and then our physician, Dr. Ann Moore, oversees all of the care. So really an entire team that comes in and provides support in many ways to not just the patient, but the family. So our goal, again, to come in and provide support to everyone, the caregivers, families, and the patients at that time. So if you have any questions during my presentation, just shout it out. This is very fun and informal. Yes. Correct. Whoever the caregiver is, family. Sure, that's a fantastic question. And our goal when our team comes in, our goal is to provide some relief for the caregiver and relief for the family while we're there. We can help manage medications. We can help manage symptoms that that patient is experiencing from the illness, which will hopefully relieve the caregiver if their symptoms are being managed. Maybe the patient is a little bit irrational or hard to take care of because they're not being managed and their symptoms are out of control. Also, we can provide respite care. So I won't touch too much on respite care, but respite care is for the caregiver of a patient. They can come to our hospice home, or they can go to a nursing facility that we're contracted with to do respite care for 5 days. and give that caregiver a break. The caregiver can stay at home for 5 days and do nothing if that's what they want, or maybe they want to go see their grandkids, maybe they want to go on vacation. But for that 5 days, and I think that's every 30 days that you are provided that under the hospice benefit, is a respite care benefit for the caregiver. So it is not 24/7 care. You are correct. We don't come in and take the brunt of that. But our goal certainly with all of those disciplines is to come in and relieve some of that for you. And even through that respite care, that 5 days can be really good for someone if they're the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week caregiver. And again, you can do that. I believe it's every month. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's every 30 days. So that would be helpful. But again, we have the non-denominational spiritual care and that social worker, and they come in and provide emotional support that you really can't put a price on that. Sometimes that emotional support helps you mentally and emotionally as the caregiver, as the full-time caregiver, to be able to provide a different type of care. So there is a lot of different ways that the team can come in, even though they may only be there for an hour twice a week. If you have a nurse coming twice a week, an aide coming 2 different days, a social worker coming one day, and a spiritual care coming one day, and they all come on different days, maybe someone's there every day for an hour. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but they can take a lot of that pressure off. Did that help answer your question? I'm sorry, she didn't have a good experience. And we often find that you know, there are a lot of different hospice agencies, and we all have the same guidelines and regulations we have to follow for Medicare and Medicaid and that type of thing. But we are different in some ways. Stillwater Hospice has a licensed music therapist. Not every hospice agency has music therapy. So we can offer that. That is a little different. That's another discipline that can come into the home and provide support in a different way. I always hate to hear that someone's hospice experience wasn't great. And I hope that doesn't deter someone else from using it and having their own experience, because they are very, very different. And I'm sorry that your friend didn't have a good experience, but they can offer a lot. And my suggestion to everyone is to always interview different agencies. There are a lot of different agencies around the area, especially in Allen County. So I say interview the same way that you would for a job. Interview different agencies, see who the right fit for your loved one would be. And I always tell everyone, at least meet with everyone on your care team once. You never know who you'll connect with. So any other questions before I move on? Yes.
Talk about the 5 days a month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that 5 consecutive days, or can that be broken up 5 days a day at a time?
I believe it is consecutive days. It is 5 consecutive days. Some people, believe it or not, will say 5 days is too long. As a caregiver, even though we're overwhelmed, sometimes it's hard to give up that control. We're not sure someone's going to know everything our loved one likes and what they want us to do. So even though someone is offered 5 consecutive days, sometimes they'll say, I'm just going to bring them to hospice home for respite for a weekend. And so they come for 2 days. But if you use those 2 days that month, you can't use the 3 days later. It is consecutive. But again, it's 5 days every 30 days. So good question though. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, so that's a little bit about hospice care. If something does pop into your mind, feel free to ask. Just because I'm moving on doesn't mean that you still can't ask. I'll talk just a little bit about our grief center. So the grief center and our hospice home, which John will talk about, is on Homestead and Liberty Mills Road out here in Southwest Allen County. So it's right down the street. On our campus is the hospice home and the grief center. The Grief Center was established in 2015. It's the Peggy F. Murphy Community Grief Center. Out of that grief center, we provide individual one-on-one grief counseling, ongoing support groups, and some really neat programs. And everything that is out of the grief center is free to anyone in the 12 counties that we serve. So hospice involvement is not required. If you know someone who is struggling from loss of a loved one or a friend, then you can have them contact the grief center and they can provide grief support to them regardless of their affiliation with Stillwater. And on those ongoing support groups, we have a lot of different types. We even have a pet loss support group for someone who's maybe lost a pet that was a family member. The one-on-one counseling can be done in person or over the phone. If someone is struggling and cannot get there physically, they can still call or do telehealth. And then those really neat programs I talked about are, they do a memories for mom around Mother's Day. They do a dedication for dad around Father's Day. They also do a yoga for grief. So a lot of different neat programs. And again, everything is free of charge out of that comes out of that grief center. And it's for adults. If we have someone that calls for a child, we recommend them to Aaron's house here in Fort Wayne. So we specialize with adults. Any questions about the grief center? Okay. And again, the hospice home is on the same campus, that beautiful campus that we're going to talk about today. The hospice home is a 14-bed unit. We have been open 23 years this year. I have to remember that we're in 2024 and it's a new year. So hospice home's been open 23 years. And again, it's a 14-bed unit. It is not a long-term unit, long-term facility where patients can go to live. It is a short-term stay. It's for our hospice patients that are either maybe coming for respite that we talked a little bit about, or if we have a hospice patient at home that is in a crisis. So our goal with hospice care is comfort, and part of that is keeping you out of the hospital. So if we have a patient at home and they're in a lot of pain or they're having extreme nausea, some kind of symptom that they can't get managed at home, we can take them to the hospice home where we're staffed 24/7 with our nurses and they can get that symptom under control. And once that patient is managed, then we can send them back home. So kind of like the ICU for hospice. So short-term stay, what we mean when we say that is 2 weeks or less. The average length of stay for a patient is about 5 days. Any questions about hospice home? We are doing a remodel. It will be done this year, right? Yes, we'll cross everything that we can on that. It has obviously taken longer than we anticipated as
It died. I hope not. Can you hear us now?
probably my
No.
I didn't take that very well. I just kept on going.
Let's see. Yeah, the light is gone. Let's see the other one.
I did leave some brochures up here for our grief support and for hospice care. If you have any questions.
How about now?
Always find the ongoing support groups and everything on our website for free.
Hello. Sorry. This green light's working. Let's see if this is working. Hello. Okay. I think I'm here. Okay. All right. So now we've got John. Sorry, my phone. I'm not a tech whiz. Okay, there we go. All right. So now we've got John, wonderful Little River volunteer, also Indiana master naturalist, and the Hospice Prairie steward. So if you guys could give John a warm welcome now. Make sure this is still working. Cool. Cool. And we can see the light. Cool. All right.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
And hello, where are the Zoom? Where do I look to see the people in Zoom? Are they just on your phone? Laptop? Okay. Hello, people in Zoom land. I do not have the loudest voice. So if anybody is having trouble hearing me, would you please just raise your hand and I will do a better job of projecting. But thank you all very much for coming today to hear about Stillwater and especially our native prairie that we have. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the history, which I delved into in order to present today. This is the first time that this has been seen, so bear with me. I do have a lot of pictures. There will be some that I may go through quickly because as I built the presentation, I thought that there might be some subgroups over the years who might appreciate little sections, not the whole thing. So I may flip through a few real quick. And then the prize at the end is I have a collection of the flowering forbs, herbaceous plants that grow in our prairie. And I thought we might do a little ID. Those of you who are into native plants, maybe you can shout out the names. So that's going to be our reward for going through the history of the prairie and what we have done in recent times. So just to give you an overview, there's probably no sound here, is there? The broadcast through. You're looking at the prairie in late summer, early fall. And I just thought that this would be a nice introduction to give you an overview. It is just under 2 acres in size. And this sits behind Hospice Home at 5910 Homestead Road. So as you turn in, make a left, go to the back of the parking lot. And right now there's a construction trailer and fence. Just keep on pursuing it, walk around that, and you will come on 2 acres of what part of Indiana used to look like. We're very happy to now have it certified by the Indiana Native Plant Society. And part of committing to this particular program is that we continue to take out anything that comes in. That's okay. Oh, okay. Okay. It's no big deal. There we go. Oh, there we go. So we are committed to anytime an invasive species comes into the land, we are committed to taking it out, keeping it true native Indiana prairie. And one more. For some reason, I haven't thought to do this in the summertime when it's mostly in bloom. So 2024, John has something else on his to-do list. Thank you. All right, as some of you may know, but for those who don't, the prairie in all of North America covered a third of the continent, and 40% of the United States was covered in some form or another of prairie. There are different kinds of prairie. We'll touch on that in a minute. But if you stop to think about it, that is a great space of land. This is the tall grass prairie that existed in the 1800s when the settlers first came and documented the area. So for those in the back, here is Indiana. You'll notice that the reason that the Illinois license plate says Prairie State is because it was almost all prairie, as was Iowa. We had a section in Northwest Indiana, and then we did have some in Allen County, and then it skipped over into Ohio, little islands of native prairie. So 15% of Indiana in the 1800s was native prairie, mostly north and west of the Wabash River. The rest was scattered around, including a little bit here in Allen County, and 85% of Indiana was native deciduous tree forest. Iowa, by comparison, as you just saw on the map, was flip-flopped. They had 15% native tree forests, and 85% of the land was native prairie. Here's a little more detailed map of Indiana. As I said, there are different kinds of prairies: sand, black silt loam, and dry gravel hill. We had all three in Indiana, and the one that we are talking about today that is a, well, I'm not going to jump ahead, but it is a black silt loam prairie that we have. and that you are welcome to come see anytime. A man wrote a paper, research paper in 1978 at Northeastern Illinois University, and his name was Robert Betts. And I'm not going to read verbatim because I don't like going to PowerPoint presentations and insulting people's intelligence by having it read. But what he found was that Indiana's prairie was especially important because it was where two ecosystems met. So they called it ecotonal. We had the deciduous forest right up next to the tall grass prairie. And in states like Illinois and Iowa, that didn't exist. So he went on and studied and wrote a very fascinating paper about why the climate allowed both forest and a complex prairie system, and that in order to better understand the transition across the United States in our ecosystem, one of our key emphasis and reasons to study it is that it's very complex to have both trees and native prairies smashed up against each other. They work in tandem. The animals love it, insects love it, and we will dig into that just in a minute a little bit more. What happened after the 1800s and the Europeans settled our land was that the settlers cut the forests down for timber, and they found that the soil, because of the long history of the trees and what the trees do to the soil, made it very, very fertile ground. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but agriculture certainly moved in, and forests and prairies gave way for that development. Wetlands also were drained, and the meandering rivers like the Little River were changed to straight ditches for use in irrigation of those fields. We certainly are sitting right now on a beautiful example of prairie or of marshland in the form of Little River. And unfortunately, in the 1800s, many of those marshes were drained, and today we are struggling to get them back. And thank goodness for organizations like Little River Wetlands Project that is helping us achieve that. Very important to have both ecosystems around. So humans, like we're known to do, transform the natural world and the landscape. How much prairie land do you think exists in the United States? Remember, it used to be as high as 40%. Anybody want to take a stab on how much we have left? I heard 10%, 2%, 5%, 5%, less than 1% exists. And some of those are like the Stillwater Prairie, ones that have been planted since the settlers took them away. So when that happened, there was an outcry with the naturalists in the country to bring change. They recognized that we were losing species that needed prairie land in order to survive. And one gentleman, thank goodness, came along named Doug Ptolemy. He's one of the champions of native prairie land in the United States. And he recognized that we were at a critical loss of ecosystems that provide or produce oxygen, clean water, flood control, pollination, pest control, carbon storage, and on and on. And if we do not do something about bringing that ecosystem back, the world could become seriously compromised. So he was a leader in the field to help us all as humans pay more attention to this, and asked that we all consider in the entire country, if every landowner were to change part of their property back to native plants, we could do and grow a national park, if you will, yard by yard. So he set out a goal to end the ecological wasteland that was occurring in the United States, and he birthed a movement called Homegrown National Park. Could I see by a show of hands who has heard of that before? Okay, a handful of you have, great. That was just recently. It took a lot to find when he actually coined the term, but I did land on 2021, so just a few years ago. And that movement now is quite strong. And in 2006, long before Doug Ptolemy started to speak out, 2006, Stillwater, then called Visiting Nurse, as you just heard from Shandi, had a leadership team that was looking at their piece of land. So Stillwater is encompassed by the yellow outline here. And here is Hospice Home, opened in about 2020. And up here is our grief center that went in 2015, Emily, is that correct? Yep, 2015. And in 2006, leadership looked at this L-shaped piece of land. They noticed that it was definitely lowland, and that part of it is often in some form of ephemeral wetland stage. And all around us here is suburbia. Many, many homes. This is all the Bittersweet community around this section. And I have to give the leadership team, who I did not know at that point, a lot of kudos, because they, instead of developing this piece of land, and you could have probably fit easily 5 large houses out here, they kept it and they decided to plant a native prairie. And that was just in 2006. And that native prairie now has grown into hosting plants that like wetness. They like mesic conditions, which is moderate moisture, and we have a section that stays quite dry. So to have all 3 zones in a 2-acre plot of land committed to native plants is quite remarkable. So 15 years before Doug Ptolemy talked about growing a homegrown national park with native plants in various spots around the country to bring that ecosystem back, Stillwater was on it, and they put in a prairie. So we've got 18 years of growth now in that prairie. And the mission, as Shandi did say, of Stillwater is to provide compassion, comfort, and guidance through life's journey by having a 2-acre native plant habitat back here that has trails all through it. It provides a place for family members, especially of those patients that are in hospice home, to take a break from all that is to go through life with a loved one who is dying. So we have many patients' families who maybe have children who've come to see grandma or grandpa, and they leave hospice home out these doors, and they immediately have a park to play in. And not only a park, but a very quiet, calm one that supports many birds, insects, and animals. So there's always something to see, no matter what the season is. I just saw a deer last night out in this section right here. It's a place of peace, calm, and provides solace to people who need it at the hardest time of life. Yes. Nice. I'm glad you had that experience. I'm sorry for your loss. So we were ahead of our time at Stillwater, and I celebrate that. We have values that Shandi mentioned, and the one that I often go back to is stewardship amongst all of the values at Stillwater. And by taking care of this piece of land and all 8 acres that we sit on with a nod towards planting native plants is really being a good steward. And all of you who do it at your own houses, I celebrate that as well. It's really important to take, let nature, get back here. Yeah, to put a focus on the natural world anytime we can in life. I have superimposed the most recent aerial photo of the prairie in this former plot of land, so you can see that in the summertime, it adds a lot of nice color and beauty. So we are now at Stillwater. We have our prairie registered with the Homegrown National Park organization that Doug Ptolemy started, and we are proud of that. His goal is to return 2 million acres back to native plant life. The US currently has almost 95,000 acres towards that goal. We are 2 acres of that, and in Indiana, we have just over 1,500 acres replanted in native plants. So in Fort Wayne, Indiana, the little red dot with a firefly on it is the Stillwater Prairie. The prairie provides many different looks through the year, as you can imagine. Here's a flower arrangement cut in late spring, early summer that we took inside from the prairie to provide some comfort to patients who couldn't get outside. And here's an aerial view in the summer to show the rich, lush greenness. Sometimes our lawns turn brown because of lack of water. The prairie is supported with very long root systems in the plants. So it's really rare to see in summertime, even if there's a drought like we had in June, the prairie still stays green, whereas the surrounding lawns go brown unless they're irrigated. Here's another summer picture just recently with some compass plant in the foreground. There's monarda, there's daisy fleabane, and it's very lush and green. Here's your fall. And as much snow as we haven't had this year, that's the best I could do for the presentation. There's a little snow on the paths, but I love the hues. It's very Andrew Wyeth-like this time of year. It is worth still looking. If you get into the area, please visit us. So that begs the question then, is it possible, we know where the prairie land was, thanks to records from the settlers, is it possible that Stillwater Prairie was a native prairie? Maybe it's a remnant. Wouldn't that be exciting? Nope, it isn't. Thanks to Beth Ricketts, who did research finding the first land survey that dated from January 18th, 1829, with quill and pen ink. Explorers went around our area. Beth researched the Little River Valley for both Little River wetlands, and she went as far as where the Stillwater Prairie exists. And that handwriting that they used in the early 1800s is a very difficult script to read. It's not German Schrift, but it might as well be. So Beth, bless her heart, found a computer program that was made to, there we go, that was made to decipher all of that. And it was then translated into this, which allows us to see that the section is where the Stillwater Prairie sits. And they found an American beech that it was 16 inches in diameter, a white oak, 18 inches, a poplar tree, 25 inches, hickory, black walnut, white oak, and then they come up with a summary that says its land is gently rolling, first rate, timber is hickory, beech, white and red oak, and black walnut. So we're really lucky to know that where we now maintain a native prairie, there had been a native deciduous forest. I geek out on that sort of thing, and I find it very reassuring that it's not a parking lot now. It's plant life. Someone, I think it was Jeff Ormiston, who originally showed me the GIS system that you can look at for different properties in Allen County. And here is the first one that exists from 1938, and the dashed green line is the current Stillwater property. So in 38, you can see that it was mostly agriculture. That's no surprise, we knew that. What I was surprised to find out were these rows of, can you see the repeated patterns of the dots? Sam recommended that I check with the Purdue Extension and their ag person, and he confirmed that most likely that was an attempt at apple orchard growing. So in 38, back then, I would say a good 2/3 of the Stillwater property was an apple orchard. This is just a close-up. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly so we can see the growth. Still an apple, well, that's the close-up of 38. In 1957, it was back to a row crop, or maybe for the first time a row crop. This farm exists. Those are farm buildings, exist for quite a while. I added the addresses in. Obviously, there aren't homes there, but I like to get a feel for where development is coming when you look at these historical maps. 72, look at the fact that it's still a farm. These are essentially still crops, but look at the water features in there. It was definitely a lowland just as it is today. And when this satellite picture was taken, there was a lot of water in that farm field. Reminds me of driving by Little River on Engle Road when it was still a farm. And it was, I think, half the year, not crops, but water like it is today. Here's 1986, still farmland. Farm is still there in 95. And you can see the evidence of row crops where we now sit. This is the prairie. This is the section of the prairie right here. So that was as recent as 95. 99, still crops, farm still exists, and then here's the big change. By 2003, the farm is gone. Somebody recently told me this is where Joe Sullivan built his first house, the developer, and now suburbia is starting to kick in all around us. Hospice Home is now built, the initial building for it, by 2003, and the prairie is just old farmland. Nothing's been planted here. It's a close-up of the same picture. In 06, the animal hospital has gone in, which is our neighbor, Indian Creek. The grief center is still a dream. And 2006 now, this is the year the prairie is planted. Doesn't look like when the satellite picture was taken that it was prairie yet. Here's 2008. I don't see evidence of a lot of prairie plants, so that was all started with seed by Heartland Restoration. So in 2 years' time, I'm guessing most of those were probably 4 to 6 inches high, maybe a little higher within 2 years, but it's all about patience. Here you can, by 2009, start to see how it was seeded. This is the prairie down here. You can start to see the rows. That's not a crop or a cover crop. That would be the beginnings of the prairie. 2012, the pathways have been put in on the prairie. Those are the curved lines. 2015 now, our grief center joins the Stillwater campus up here on the hill. And you see this line that runs through the prairie. That is a scar from an overflow pipe that had to be dug and put in to allow this pond to drain to a pond here should it get too high. And that scar we still fight in this area. They brought a lot of the clay from where they put the pipe up and put it closer to the top, so the soil isn't as rich. So we struggle and just reseeded this year, but it's nice. We didn't know that until I dug up this picture. So it's nice to know why this is a troubled spot in the prairie. It's because it was developed. If you call a, yes.
If it's raining on Stillwater, that water, the drainage goes, assuming it's going, well, ultimately it'll go down towards the valley.
Yes.
Have you tracked the drainage across the now developed land, where it goes?
This, so when this overflows, it flows underground in a pipe to this retention pond. This is in Bittersweet, so it's one of the Bittersweet lakes. That has an overflow that goes out further west. I've never tracked it to know where it goes next. Yeah, I'll do it. Want to come with me? Let's do it. Let's find that out. Yeah.
Nature's never static as well. And so even though the earliest writings put it as being forested with oak trees and beech and so on, because nature's static, if you look, harken back, the Pleistocene was a mere 12,000 years. And it could have been prairie and then forested and then prairie again. So, you know.
That's a good point. Succession, right?
Because when they were restoring Eagle Marsh, the earth movers pulled away some earth and there were storage of seeds. Seed stock is still there. So I don't know if there's some place that's pristine enough that you can bore down and get a soil sample. And maybe, you know, the prairie plants ran pretty deep. Still find
that's a
seeds there.
I would love that. I wonder how far down we'd have to go to find it. We're going to talk on a burn that's coming up, and that the burn might allow some of those seeds to sprout as well. And now 2018, this is the most recent picture, 2021. So what happened between being seeded in 2006 and today, 2024? Well, a lot. As I've said, it was planted in 06, and my personal memory of the prairie starts in April of 2014, when I was walking the prairie every day for 10 days while my own mother lay in hospice home, living out her life for the last. And when I needed a break from the vigil by my mom's side, I would go and get my comfort from the prairie. So for 10 days, I would walk the prairie and make sense of what was happening in my life. And it was rich and green. And even though it was early spring, there were things blooming like golden Alexanders. It was just lovely. And one of the reasons I'm involved today is because of my personal memory. In preparing for today's project, I wanted to be able to tell you when the prairie's prescribed burn was done. We've only had one, and it was, much to my surprise, April 24th, 2014, the day my mom passed. So I was inside Hospice Home, not knowing that in 2021 I would become involved in care of this prairie. If I had just bothered to stand up and look out the window, because my mom's window faced west, I would have seen smoke and fire and the prairie burning. I didn't. I was overwhelmed with other emotions at that time, as you can imagine. So we've had the one burn in 2014, and this is the post-burn evaluation report that shows what burned, what didn't, because it was wetland, what the wind was, humidity level, and it is overdue to be burned again. Here is Eagle Marsh going up, a section of it this year. I was very grateful to be told when it was happening so I could zoom over there and get some pictures and see how it was done. This is all done professionally. Little River used Blue Heron Ministries, I believe, right? And we will be using Heartland for this particular burn since they planted it. Our burn will look more like this. We're going to try to keep the flames down because we have a neighborhood very close to us, and we'll accomplish that through several methods that Heartland has instructed us on. When the prairie is done burning, much of the ground will look like that, charred, a lot of carbon, and I believe this section of Eagle Marsh came back within about 2 weeks. Is that right, Amy and Allie? After 4 weeks, right? And I think you had a big event, was 2 or 3 weeks after this. Was it the Monarch? Earth Day? Yeah, it was Earth Day. That's right, yes. So pretty remarkable. Why do we burn prairies? Well, when the settlers first came and the explorers, they found that Native Americans were burning their prairie. If lightning didn't start it, the Americans were doing it, the natives. What has been found through scientific study is that it opens the soil after being burned with the process of heat and moisture that germinates seeds that we want, that are in the seed bank natively. It suppresses the growth of all the undesirables that have come in, the invasive species, whether it be grasses or forbs, flowering plants. It encourages the germination and growth of that native seed bank that Sam just mentioned that might be in there from many, many years ago. It can encourage them to sprout, and it controls woody species. I know the Stillwater Prairie has many wild dogwoods that volunteer. Of course, we have all the invasive species that are woody too, which I'll cover in a minute. So fire can knock those out. Even an overgrowth of eastern red cedars can be taken care of with a fire. They do propagate pretty easily. So here we come in 2 months, and Heartland has submitted our permit to burn, and if IDEM approves it and we get the right weather conditions, within a morning's worth of work, our prairie should be starting over, so to speak. So I'll keep you posted on that if you're interested. The only pictures that my supervisor, Sarah Plasterer, and I could come up with were from 2016. And our colleague Bonnie helped me find these. So in 2016, we know that our prairie was looking pretty good. This is just 2 years after I walked it when my mom was needing hospice services. So you see a lot of good health, and I have several members of the Prairie Posse. That's what we call the group of volunteers who care for the prairie. This is looking out towards the south, and this is the area that in 2021, when we started our reclamation project, most of this was teasel. And if you don't know what teasel is, you'll see a picture of it in a minute, but it's a highly invasive plant. So in 2016, no teasel. By 2021, this was a field of teasel. So talk about succession and the way nature doesn't stop. It really changed quickly. This is another 2016. You've got brown-eyed Susans. You do have some Queen Anne's lace, which we try to keep ahead of, and Monarda, bee balm in the foreground. So it was really pretty, really well done. All of the seeds that had been planted did well. That's curly dock. We do manage that as well. Not something that's desirable. And here's the last one from 2016, looking southwest. And it's really interesting to see that in the spring, we have a service berry in the foreground, which is good, but check out all of these. Boom, 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 boom. What are those? Bradford calorie pears, yes, yeah, and they are very invasive. The prairie alone had 42 from adult size pear trees to whippets. I believe it was 42 that we took out in 2021. So it was becoming a pear forest rather than a native prairie. And it's also telling in 2016 to see that the grasses are not that dense. There are still spaces in between the grasses. And now you'd be really challenged to find a space in between some of those big blue stems and other grasses that are growing. I was wrong. Here's one more from 2016. We have a willow tree on campus, and that's its small size. In 2016, when we started in and reclaiming it, this was all teasel. This was Canada thistle and crown vetch. These are all invasive species. And as about back to the middle was a monoculture of teasel. There were very few good plants in this area. So the change happened fast. There's what the willow tree looked like after we limbed it up so we could put a picnic table under it. And you can see now, this is from 2021. This is the same area you were just looking at, and all of this brown is teasel. And this is a nice stand, isn't that beautiful, of thistles, Canada thistles. Here is the teasel plant. We are lucky to have two varieties, cut leaf and regular. And I can't even tell you how many thousands we've worked on. There's a line in the Bible that says, "The poor ye always shall have." And I take comfort in my mind. I remind myself, teasel ye always shall have. So we fight it, but it's never going to go away completely. We're doing our best. And I say, boy, howdy, they moved in. This is crown vetch. I believe that originated from Scotland, was brought in as a farmer's friend, and it just liked our climate way too much. So it's a beautiful plant, but it was probably, I think our report had 30% of the prairie was covered in crown vetch. Too much for our team to handle, so we brought in Heartland and their crew, and all of the brown you see in this picture from 2021 is purposely hit by Heartland for crown vetch and a little bit of the teasel problem we had. So that gives you an idea of what we started in 2021. I as a volunteer, and then I think we had a dozen people quickly, including Becky, come and help us get started on the invasive species that had moved in. You're going to see a list of people who have been involved in this project in a moment. The first person to walk it with me and start teaching me things was Beth Ricketts and Sam Schwartz, the two in the room here today. So thank you both for helping me and get me started on the education route. My background is as a photographer. I happen to love nature and plants, but I didn't know much at all about native prairie plants. So the last 3 years have been a deep dive, and I have a long list of people to thank for what I have started to learn now. This is the most recent picture of the prairie taken in September. John McGully has a drone that is beautiful. So it's a drone image. In 21, we solicited the help of the State of Indiana Cooperative Invasives Management Team, which I learned about from Beth. And Dugan Julian came out and came up with a really great 3-page report on the prairie, helped me identify the things that we needed to focus on getting rid of year by year. And we are now 3 years into that plan. And he came up with a list of everything that was invasive by the percentage. So the ones at the top of the list are the pears, and then teasel, and then thistle, and then crown vetch, Asian bush honeysuckle, autumn olive, and the rest were in smaller quantities, but still invasive species. So my team and I have made great strides in removing those. This is a batch of pears, 452 in 21 alone, of 14 different invasive species. Now remember the pictures you just saw from 2016, it looked really good, didn't it? The prairie looked really good in 2016. By 2021, the invasives had moved in, and it was starting to become, like I said, a pear forest and honeysuckle forest. So thanks to a great group of people, We use different methods to remove the invasives from cut surface stump. I'm the only one who sprays, and you'll see a picture of me in a minute. I'm wrapped up tight, and I only spot spray. There's not a big effort, or it is a big effort to not spray large areas, but I'm very careful with the use of herbicide. We've had great luck using the glove of death to hand wick cattails that are getting out of bounds. I doubted whether that trick was going to work, and boom, it took the cattails down within 2 weeks of application, and no collateral damage around it. I'm sorry, glove of death is you put a nitrile glove on to protect your skin, a nice fitting, good quality one, and then over it goes a thick cotton glove that's disposable because they're inexpensive. And then you saturate the glove with a mixture of, we use both glyphosate and triclopyr because they both affect the plant life differently. And then you go to the bottom of the cattail and you wick up the leaves. So the leaves of the cattail that you want to get rid of are the only thing that the glyphosate and triclopyr touch. So it's a very safe. And if there's a lot of water around, there's another chemical you can use that's water safe as well. And it works really well. We also remove blooms after, so we still have some teasel. We still have ragweed. We still have too much goldenrod. Goldenrod's not a bad plant, but when you get too much of it, it can be aggressive. So after those blooms have been spent, so that the pollinators had a chance to suck the nectar and do what they love to do with their flowers, we go through before the seeds are dropped, and my Prairie Posse and I cut the bloom heads off, and then we dispose of them. Teasel we sterilize before giving them to the landfill. The other ones that aren't so invasive, we just put right into the dumpster to be hauled away. That was a trick taught to me by Little River Wetlands to manage a crop or a species that isn't terrible, but you don't want any more of. I never would have thought of it myself. So it's been working pretty well, wouldn't you say? We've also mowed the entire prairie when it became apparent that we couldn't burn too quickly because it cost $2,000 to do a burn of our property size. So we mowed the whole thing, and then we had groups of volunteers come in and rake it up and dispose of it, the duff, so that the sun the next year could reach the soil, and we saw a really nice regrowth of the prairie. So my plan going forward is hopefully a burn every 4 years, if we can afford it, and that center second year we'll mow and rake the duff away to keep the soil exposed to the sunshine. And let's see here, how am I doing on time? Great, okay. This is an example of two very healthy pear trees that had sprouted in the pathway, and those were very early on in the process. Mike Avila taking one of them down, and our own Becky Cummings here working on the start of the other one. So that gives you an idea of how big some of them were. They cast a lot of shade, and a prairie does not want shade. It needs sunshine. Here's a honeysuckle shrub, just to show you the sheer size of some of them that came out. We still are working in one section of the prairie to get rid of all of the honeysuckle. Again, kudos to Little River, who have been a great partner with us in this process, teaching me about how to use the cut stump removal process, where you just use glyphosate dabbed on the outside of the stump to prevent it from resprouting in the next growing season. Honeysuckle is a very rigorous, healthy plant that we have way too many of. These are pear trees that came out in the first year, and they all had to be cut up. And here's Kim Avila and Becky stuffing them in one of our dumpsters. We had so much debris that I think we took 3 months to get rid of it, every week putting more into the dumpster. I could not have done it without the Prairie Posse. It's an example of what I look like when I go out to hit some of the invasive species. And this is a lovely stand of Canada thistle and crown vetch that no longer exists. We have been successful in getting rid of that. It's very pretty, I heard somebody say, very pretty, but it would be the entire prairie if we did not take it out. These are teasel cuts. That's where we take the blooms off at the end of after they bloom, before the seeds drop. I've cut one of these heads. I've sliced it in many different slices, and there have to be 1,000 seeds in each head. Does anybody know how many there are in a teasel bloom? It's just, you can't count them. Yes, way too many. Here's an example. That's all teasel piled up. And this is the area that you saw from 2016 that was all brown-eyed Susans. Now, this is the result of a teasel infestation. Ragweed we take out after it has, well, before the seeds drop for sure. That's a major allergy plant that causes allergies, so we are very careful about getting rid of it. All right, when you take all that out, all that debris comes out, well, you got to plant something in its place. So in 2021, there were 35 species recorded of plants, flowering plants, and 7 grasses. In 2022, we purchased 160 plant plugs from Heartland Restoration. And in 2022 to 23, we planted our own seeds in milk jugs, also taught us by Little River Wetlands. And we had success. In 23, not only did we buy 128 plugs at wholesale from Heartland, but we also, because our jugs did so well, we were able to plant 351 plant plugs. Those are like 4 to 6 inches high into our prairie. So we are well on our way of reestablishing the native prairie. Cindy Nestle is one of our Prairie Posse members. Here she is sorting senna seeds. And she has brown-eyed Susans next up on her right. And we came up with a lot of our own seeds from our own prairie, and then some other very generous people donated to the cause. Judith Nastali gave us a bunch, and Beth Ricketts is about to give us some, I think, right, Beth? Oh, she's got them, all right. Yay, yay. So we plant them in milk jugs and seal them up for the winter, keep them moist or snow covered. In this case, if there's no snow, hopefully we're gonna get some here shortly. We won't have to worry about it, but I will take a mister or a light hose and make sure that they stay wet through the winter. So from seeds to the cotyledon, the small embryonic leaves that first sprout in the spring before the mature leaves show up. And these are just some of our open shells to show you the growth cycle. We've labeled them all and put them in separate jugs so we know what we're growing. Those are cotyledons as well, the small leaves. And then when it becomes 50 degrees or warmer, we open the jugs so that they can start to harden off and get used to our weather. Often in the spring, there'll be some days where they're open if the sun is out so they don't bake to death. And then in the winter or in the nighttime, we have to close them up to keep them warmer. So it's a little bit of open and closing like you do a greenhouse when it gets warmer. So we grew a lot of different varieties, some that we didn't have before. And when they get to a nice, decent size in the early summer, we transfer them all to their each little solo cup. And we burn holes in the bottom of the solo cups with a solder iron, a trick that Julie Farrison found on the internet, and it works really well. Julie's another member of the Prairie Posse. So they can drain, and then we keep them watered all through the summer. Our collection grew because more people got involved. And they start to grow and grow. And we had a vole make a home in between the cups. So when I go to water them or weed them, he kept me company. He or she kept me company. We're getting a little farther along in the summer. You can see they're really healthy, great variety. We had no idea I had no idea that so many would do so well. And then they go into the ground. This was in September, October. Funny story that this is an annual. Here's one blooming before we planted it. Can somebody help me? Partridge pea, thank you, Beth. And so I put those in the ground, and it was late and I needed to get home. So I did not spray them with liquid fence. And the next morning I came and they were all eaten to the ground. And that has happened in previous plantings where animals, deer, rabbits look at our small plants as a salad bar and they help themselves. So we've learned. So that learning has now meant that when we planted all 351 plants this fall, we made cloches out of chicken wire. And so we put 4 to 5 of the plant plugs under a cloche and then with landscape staples, fasten the cloche down. That's what it looks like right now in the wintertime. Most of them survived. They have not been eaten, I'm happy to say. And here's what would have eaten them if we hadn't covered them. So we now have a cloche farm on our prairie. especially you can see them all now. And I think we'll probably leave them on during March's burn unless Heartland tells us otherwise. But Heartland schooled me that since we got the plants planted in September, that by the time the fire comes in March, they should be established enough that the roots will not be harmed and they will grow back after the fire. They're all going dormant now, as you can imagine. We maintain, thanks to John McGully and his drone, each year we make a new map of the prairie. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. This is plasticized and we use a wipe marker on it so it can be reused, wiped off, reused. And this tells us where we planted everything this year so that in the spring and summer, we know where not to step or where not to spray. And that's what organization will do for you, keep you on track. So now we have 55 different species of native flowering forbs, 10 grasses, 2 native sedges, and I obtained 6 new species of seeds from the Indiana Native Plant Society seed swap, and they are now in the ground, thanks to Becky, coming out in December, and we're gonna hope to see that 55 number grow to 60 or 61 if they survive. So yes, indeed, we have a lot of wildlife. We suspected it, but we didn't know for sure until one of our volunteers generously donated 2 wildlife cameras. So now we definitely know that we are a place that wildlife likes. And I like to think of the prairie as an oasis or a way station to all of the wonderful preserves that exist just a mile or 2 from the prairie. Right now, it would take you 4 minutes to drive to the prairie from here. And this is the Little River Valley we're sitting in. So I hope that many of the animals that we help support in our prairie are actually making the rounds from as far as Eagle Marsh, Fox Island, Arrowhead, Buttonbush, and LC Nature Park. We're probably the closest to Arrowhead, Buttonbush, and LC Nature Park. Here are some things that we have seen in the form of wildlife. Had a green heron for 2 years in one of our ponds. This caterpillar was found by Becky and photographed. It's either the goldenrod hooded owlet or asteroid moth. We can't tell because they look identical on the map. Eastern deer mouse. Bumblebees galore, love the pollen that our plants produce. Of course, monarchs, indigo buntings we've seen. I'm not going to name all these. I'll just let you enjoy the pictures. We have a couple killdeer that raise 1 or 2 broods in the prairie every year. So we're privileged to be able to watch the chicks when they're born before they run off within about a week. All kinds of butterflies. Joe Pye weed, it's loving. And to prove that teasel does have somewhat of a purpose is your black swallowtail on one of our blooms that we leave reluctantly until it's spent. And of course, Monarda, bee balm. Polyphemus, that nest was no more than 2 inches across in a senna plant, so I'm assuming it might have been a finch raising young. We had a juvenile red-shouldered hawk last year, and this year we have an adult who spends most of his time on the prairie, or her time, and I think it might be the same one that grew up on our prairie and stalked our little killdeer chicks, is now an adult, so it must have found some food. This year especially, we've had sandhill cranes flying over. Well, in the Lewises, Belinda and Matt live very close to the prairie, and how many did you estimate? And this is late. Yeah, so we haven't found them to have late migration. They haven't landed in the prairie as far as I know yet, which is probably okay, but it sure is thrilling to hear them and see them flying over. I hope they land in Eagle Marsh. Oops. 2 different kinds of birds over the prairie. The thunderbirds trained or practiced before the air show. I think that was last year they were in town. They were so low at one point, both here when I was hiking at the marsh and at the prairie, that they tipped their wing and I could see the pilot on the inside, which was thrilling, but not as thrilling as seeing a bald eagle. And he does fly probably from the Arrowhead nest or the Eagle Marsh, and we get to see him not infrequently. Bullfrog, toads, we have 3 ponds in the area, so there's plenty of water. One of the ponds overflows into our prairie when it gets too full, and that's what provides our ephemeral wetland. So about 10 months out of the year, we have water standing. These are the good kind of praying mantis cases. We also have the Asian kind that I don't photograph. Viceroy and our deer. The next picture is one of my favorites. The irony. I was actually laughing out loud after I made the picture. We have a 6-point buck right now who comes about every third night. It's almost like clockwork. And when he was in rut, he had does with him, or does were with him. Raccoons, of course, and yay, we have a fox. And he also comes through about once a week. So they must have a rotation, is all I can, feeding grounds. We, for 2 years running, saw a mink in the prairie, and I took it upon myself to name it. So it's named after my mom because of my connection at Stillwater with my mom, and the care that she received there was excellent. So this is Trudy, the mink. And I must fully disclose that I was never able to get a picture of our mink. One of my volunteers almost did. They're very elusive creatures. This one I found in Eagle Marsh on Trail 5. So this is not Trudy actually, but humor me, would you? Whoops. Here's the long list of people who have come along on the ride with me. I would love to read each name out, but if you can see that, and if this is recorded, please delve into that list, because the Stillwater Prairie exists because of these people. I get to lead everybody, which is fun. It's like a candy store for me. These are a great group of folks. Everybody that has an asterisk in front of their name is currently on the posse, our Prairie Posse of volunteers. And we're always interested in new volunteers. You get a great t-shirt. Becky's wearing hers today. So if you know of anybody who's really into native plants or wants to learn, you don't need to know a thing to get involved. You'll have my business cards right here with my email address on them, and it'll also be on a screen here shortly. We have a lot of fun. There's no minimum number of hours you have to work or maximum. There's no demands. You make your own schedule once you get an email from me saying what needs to be done. That's me standing in the prairie, just to give you an idea of the breadth and the size and the variety. When it's in full bloom, it is quite a sight to see. And we've named the various areas so that we can more easily know what needs work. And we keep track of, for instance, where I spray on a particular day, so my volunteers know not to go into that area for about a week, stay safe. And here's an example of using this map to a prairie volunteer can show up and just take a section when it's time to cut the teasel or the ragweed, and they'll do that, mark it on the map that everybody can see, and they know which section to take on during their volunteer session. So we're quite easy to work with. We have large group. Oh, we're at the end, aren't we? It's okay. We have large groups that come out and volunteer. A big shout out to some of these groups. Here's a Boyd Baptist youth group who is our neighbor, and twice a year they give us their young people, and they're very energetic, and we have a great time. Here's after the mow, them raking up some of the prairie duff to dispose. Takes big dumpsters to handle all that debris. We had them over to move some of our eastern red cedars to a section of the prairie that won't see fire in March, so that we now will have a hedgerow of eastern red cedars, which is the only real native conifer. It's actually deeper for this part of Indiana. And those are now planted. All 13 survived, and they will provide a really good windbreak. There are the kids. Laura Stein Gardens volunteered this spring to help us plant many of the plugs that you saw growing in the milk jugs, and were purchased from Heartland. So we're always grateful for these wonderful groups of people who donate their time and their talents to us. We had BAE Systems come out for a big mulching party to mulch our prairie paths so that the mud stays away and you don't get too soggy. There's a nice ironweed in the foreground blooming. So we couldn't do it without all of these generous spirits in Allen County who turn out on United Way Day of Caring. Stoops Freightliner joined us, more mulching. This is United Way staff themselves who decided to come help us. That's what the prairie looks like after it's mowed. And boy, did it come back. I'm very happy to say that through a grant from the AARP Foundation, AARP, that we are now officially connected to the city trail system that runs along Liberty Mills Road. You can now access it, people of all abilities, because it's all ramped and sloped concrete. So you can bike down. We have a bike rack now, and we have a doggy pot, so you can bring your leashed dog and walk the prairie paths. We are canine friendly. And thanks to that project, now more members of the community will be able to use and enjoy our prairie. So it's mainly for our families that we serve. It's also for staff to decompress, to come out and walk in nature, but we certainly welcome members of the community too. It is a public spot on the Greenway system. This is the sign that the money that AARP gave us allowed us to put into place to explain why the prairie is important, and just some images of people enjoying being outside. Nothing makes me happier than seeing a child in nature and not on a computer. And this gives you a really good example of how Hospice Home is nestled right next to nature. I'm constantly aware as the groundskeeper and prairie steward of the cycle of life that happens in a prairie. I liken spring, summer, fall, winter to the condition of the human condition, whereas nature goes through it every year, the life cycle. I look at spring as babyhood and childhood and adolescence. Summer is when the 20s and 30s of the human condition come on. Fall is getting a little bit later in life, like I'm in now. And then winter, I liken to the need to come to terms with the fact that the human life cycle is coming to the end. So to see that in the prairie every year is very meaningful to me. It's not an analogy that may work for everybody, but when you see little baby killdeers being born in the spring, and you know what is happening by necessity of the human condition on the inside, it's a very nice blend of reminding me of the importance of life. I dedicate this entire presentation, and I won't be able to say this without a tear, but I was really lucky to have Bob Weber as my first botany and biology teacher at Southside High School. Some of you probably knew him, and he taught me so much and would be so proud that I've landed where I have. So if you know him, I celebrate Bob Weber with you. So please come visit us, take a walk anytime. If you want a tour, pick up one of my cards and shoot me an email and I'll arrange it with you. If you've got pen and paper, just grab a card. I won't go over it because we're a little short on time. Now, that's the official end of the presentation. I wasn't sure how much time I was going to have or how long it would take me, but we do have flower pictures. Allie, you tell me, does the room need to be cleared?
We have room for 10. We got 7 minutes.
Okay. All right. And it won't take any longer. So for those of you who know native plants, just call out if you know what it is. Yeah, well, Beth. Yes, New England aster and goldenrod around it. And they bloom at the same time, obviously, which makes a really striking look in August and September. Yep, bee balm or monarda. Yep, brown-eyed Susans. That's a tricky one because it's not blooming. It's one of our successful plant plugs. Yes, iris, blue flag iris. Butterfly weed. Right, button bush. We put 10 of those in this year. Grasses are tricky. I happen to know this one. Yep. Right, yes, Canada wild rye. Sorry, Sam? Yes?
Well, there's a Canada and I think it's
Nodding, okay. I need to learn more about grasses. Kim, pardon? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it's cinnamon willow weed. Beth, do you know? Sure. I think that's it. Kim Avila was the one who found it and taught me the name. Not a multiflora rose, but a, yes, climbing prairie rose. We're really lucky to have that. Compass plant. This woman's great. Helen Stuzzi is a retired physician in Newcastle, and she, through her lifetime and her career, put together acre after acre after acre of farmland. She now is up to 40 around the house that she now lives in with her husband, and she has planted and manages the Stuzzi Williams Prairie. And she's a lovely woman, and she is standing there with a very tall, I believe that's a compass plant. And she taught me a really great thing to do with especially young people who come to a prairie, and that is to go find the tall, I can't even put this up right. Find the tallest plant in the prairie, that's the length, and ask the kids as you stand next to it, as she is doing, how tall they think the prairie plant is. So in this case, can you see that well enough to make a guess? And I was going to say 10 as well. I measured it this morning. It's actually 12. And this is a remnant of prairie dock. Ironweed can get that big too, as you probably know. And then what she does, could I have a volunteer real quick? Thank you, Becky. So she asks the person that's interested in knowing more about prairie plants, she asks them how, if the plant's that tall above ground, how far down do you think the roots for that plant grow? And the kid probably will say, well, I don't know. So what you do is you have the child walk out with your tape measure out however tall they guess that plant to be above ground. So if you go out to 10 feet, that'll be good. Yeah.
Way up here.
Okay, so that, there we go. So there's the length of the plant that everybody sees above ground. Now, native plants, as many of you probably know, have root systems that can be twice as long as what you see above ground. So you have the person you're trying to impress go out another 10 feet to 20. And it's longer than that. So you have them keep going until the tape measure runs out. In this case, it's 30 feet. And LC Nature Park is really lucky to have, if you've been to LC's Nature Center, they have this hanging up, which is a life-size photograph of the big blue stem plant. Thank you, Becky. So you can impress upon people the deep root system that native plants have. And can anybody guess what the benefit is of those long roots? They're numerous. Pardon? Survive fire, for sure. Water filtration, right? Slowing down runoff, right? The water finds it much easier to take its time getting down to our groundwater when it has to go through all of that. And of course, the benefits to insects and organisms and to aerate the soil is terrific. We had our soil tested by the Allen County Soil and Water District, and it was found that we are probably in the prairie at about 50-50, 50 something, 50 air. The core that we used went down easily 4 to 5 feet without any resistance, meaning the clay is still where it should be. So that's another sign that it's never been developed, the prairie, except where the pipe went in. It's one of my favorites. Culver's root, and then bee balm monarda on the right with Culver's root. Yep, daisy fleabane. That's a tricky one. Yes, dense blazing star. And I was so excited because, as you can see from the flag down here, it's one we planted and it was going to start to bloom. And I came back I sent Becky a picture and said, look, what we have growing finally. And the next day it was scissored off right at the bottom by an animal. I took it home and put it in a vase and it still bloomed. I hope the root system is strong enough that we'll see it again next year. These are Eastern red cedars, correct. That's a good thistle, a native field thistle. Little River helped me identify that one. Right, foxglove. Did not notice that. Foxtail barley. The first spring bloomer in a prairie is Golden Alexander, right? Yep, or gray-headed, gray-headed. Dogbane. Whoever said that, blue vervain? I do not know this grass. I must learn it. Anybody have a guess? I think this is Indian grass. Sam? Yeah. More of the rye, and one on the right, I don't know. Is it big blue stem? Okay. If I'm going too fast, let me know. Switchgrass? Yay. Ironweed. Joe Pye weed. Milkweed. Mountain mint. Obedient. Another early. Yep. Ohio spiderwort. Right. Partridge pea. Prairie dock. That's the one that I brought a dormant stem from. Pardon? Big. Yes. Big elephant. Yes. Rough elephant ears. Right. Purple coneflower. Yay. We finally have this in the prairie. It is finally. It's the first one to bloom. We put in 12 of them. So 6 of them are queen of the prairie. Big candy, the flower will look like candy floss. Cotton candy, that's what I'm looking for. Yes. Rattlesnake master. Brand new little plug. Turtle head is right, white turtle head. We're almost there. Yes, indigo, correct. White wild indigo. Yep, very good, everybody. Senna. And this I just learned is the longest blooming plant on a prairie in Indiana. Any guesses what that is? You often see it in other colors. Yarrow, I didn't realize it was the longest bloomer. So now truly, thank you very much.
John and
Yeah.
Shandi, many thanks coming in on the virtual side.
Thank you, Zoom family.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully we'll see you around. Thank you so much. Oh.
Until 10, so it's really. I don't think they'd kick us out. Thank you, everyone.